The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine corridors of Clarence House as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell adjusted her uniform and prepared for what would become the most shocking investigation of her career. She had been assigned to the Royal Protection Unit just 6 months earlier, following an exemplary record with the Metropolitan Police. Her specialty in digital forensics had caught the attention of her superiors, though she never imagined it would lead her into the heart of a royal scandal. The call had come at dawn. A routine security check had revealed something unusual in the Queen Consort's private chambers. What started as a standard protocol examination would soon unravel a web of secrets that threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Detective Mitchell walked through the marble hallways, her footsteps echoing softly against the walls adorned with centuries of royal portraits. The weight of history pressed down upon her shoulders as she approached the ornate doors leading to Camilla's private study. 2 guards stood at attention, their faces betraying nothing of the gravity of the situation that lay beyond those doors. Inside the study, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Chief Inspector Robert Hartwell, a veteran of royal security with over 20 years of service, stood near an antique mahogany desk. His weathered face bore the expression of a man who had seen too much and said too little over the years. Beside him, technology specialist Emma Richardson was carefully examining a smartphone that lay on the desk like a piece of evidence in a crime scene. The phone belonged to Camilla, and what they had discovered within its digital confines would challenge everything the public thought they knew about the royal family. Richardson's fingers moved delicately across the device's screen, her expertise in digital recovery allowing her to navigate through layers of supposedly deleted content. The discovery had been accidental. During a routine security sweep designed to check for potential surveillance devices or security breaches, Richardson had been asked to examine all electronic devices in the royal quarters. What she found went far beyond the scope of their original investigation. Hidden in the depths of the phone's memory were messages that painted a picture of palace life vastly different from the carefully crafted public image. As Mitchell approached the desk, she could see the tension in Richardson's shoulders. The specialist had been working on the device for hours, carefully documenting each discovery while maintaining the strict chain of custody required for such sensitive material. The implications of what they were uncovering extended far beyond simple palace gossip or private family matters. The messages revealed a complex network of communications that spanned months. They showed Camilla engaging in conversations that would surprise even the most cynical observers of royal life. There were discussions about public appearances that were orchestrated with theatrical precision, private opinions about other members of the royal family that contradicted public statements, and, most shocking of all, evidence of knowledge about events that had been presented to the public in entirely different ways. Chief Inspector Hartwell cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. His loyalty to the crown had never been questioned, but the evidence before him presented an impossible situation. The messages they had recovered were not just embarrassing personal communications. They represented potential breaches of royal protocol and public trust that could not be ignored. Richardson continued her methodical work, each recovered message adding another piece to a puzzle that grew more complex by the hour. The sophisticated encryption that had been used to hide these communications suggested that Camilla was well aware of the sensitive nature of her digital correspondence. The very fact that such measures had been taken indicated a level of premeditation that made their discovery even more significant. The content of the messages ranged from seemingly innocent family discussions to more troubling communications about public events and royal duties. There were exchanges with unknown contacts that raised questions about the security of royal communications and the potential for outside influence on royal decisions. The picture that emerged was one of a royal household far more politically aware and strategically minded than the public had been led to believe. Detective Mitchell found herself grappling with the ethical implications of their investigation. The balance between public interest and royal privacy had always been delicate, but the nature of these communications pushed that balance to its breaking point. The messages suggested knowledge of events before they became public, participation in decisions that affected public policy, and a level of political engagement that contradicted the constitutional role of the monarchy. As the morning wore on, the team worked in careful coordination to document their findings. Each message was photographed, cataloged, and analyzed for its potential implications. The process was painstaking, requiring not just technical expertise but also a deep understanding of royal protocol and constitutional law. Every decision they made could have far-reaching consequences for the monarchy and the nation. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier as more messages were recovered. Some revealed private opinions about government ministers that could influence public policy discussions. Others showed a level of involvement in charitable organizations that went beyond ceremonial duties. Most concerning were communications that suggested advanced knowledge of government announcements and policy changes, raising questions about the separation between royal duties and political influence. Richardson's expertise allowed her to recover messages that Camilla had believed were permanently deleted. The sophisticated nature of the phone's security measures had actually worked against her, creating detailed logs of communication activities that provided a comprehensive picture of her digital correspondence over several months. What emerged was a pattern of behavior that challenged fundamental assumptions about the role of the modern monarchy. The investigation team found themselves confronting questions that went to the heart of constitutional democracy. The messages revealed a level of political engagement that, while perhaps not illegal, certainly contradicted the public understanding of royal neutrality. The careful documentation of each discovery reflected the gravity of their situation and the potential impact of their findings on the institution of monarchy itself. Chief Inspector Hartwell made the difficult decision to expand the investigation. The initial discovery had revealed enough to justify a more comprehensive examination of royal communications and activities. The team would need to be expanded, additional expertise would be required, and, most challenging of all, they would need to navigate the complex protocols surrounding investigations involving the royal family. The weight of their discovery was beginning to settle on the small team. They had uncovered evidence that could fundamentally alter public perception of the monarchy and challenge long-held assumptions about royal neutrality and political influence. The careful balance between constitutional monarchy and democratic governance was at stake, and their investigation had placed them at the center of a potential constitutional crisis. As the day progressed, it became clear that their investigation was just beginning. The messages they had recovered represented only a fraction of what might be hidden in the digital archives of the royal household. The techniques that Camilla had used to hide her communications suggested a systematic approach to managing sensitive information that raised questions about other members of the royal family and their own digital activities. The discovery would require careful handling, not just from a technical perspective but also from the standpoint of national security and constitutional stability. The messages they had uncovered could potentially influence public opinion, affect government policy, and challenge the fundamental principles upon which the modern monarchy was based. Their investigation had evolved from a routine security check into something far more significant and dangerous. Detective Inspector Mitchell spent the following days immersed in the complex task of analyzing the recovered messages while maintaining absolute secrecy about the investigation. The second phase of their work revealed patterns that were even more disturbing than their initial discoveries. The messages showed Camilla maintaining regular contact with individuals whose identities raised serious security concerns and whose influence on royal decision-making appeared to extend far beyond what constitutional protocol would allow. The investigation team had been quietly expanded to include specialists in constitutional law, cybersecurity, and intelligence analysis. Each new team member was sworn to secrecy under the Official Secrets Act, and their work was conducted in a secure facility away from the main royal residences. The gravity of their task weighed heavily on everyone involved, as they began to understand the full scope of what they had uncovered. Technology specialist Richardson had developed new techniques for recovering data from the sophisticated security systems that protected royal communications. Her work revealed that Camilla had been using multiple communication channels, including encrypted messaging applications that were typically associated with high-level government and military communications. The level of digital sophistication suggested that she had received training or assistance from security professionals, raising questions about who else might be involved in these activities. The content of the messages painted a picture of royal life that contradicted decades of carefully managed public relations. There were discussions about manipulating media coverage of royal events, coordinating responses to public criticism, and, most troubling of all, influencing charitable organizations and their fundraising activities. The messages revealed that Camilla had been actively involved in decisions that affected millions of pounds in charitable donations and had used her influence to direct funds toward organizations with which she had personal or political connections. Chief Inspector Hartwell found himself in an impossible position. His oath of loyalty to the crown conflicted with his duty to uphold the law and protect the public interest. The evidence they had gathered suggested systematic abuse of royal privilege and potential violations of charity law, and political neutrality requirements. Yet the implications of taking action against a member of the royal family were staggering, potentially destabilizing the constitutional monarchy and affecting the nation's political stability. Dr. Margaret Stevens, a constitutional law expert who had been brought in to advise the team, provided crucial guidance on the legal implications of their discoveries. Her analysis revealed that many of the activities described in the messages existed in legal gray areas where royal privilege and democratic accountability intersected in unclear ways. The challenge was determining whether behavior that was technically legal was nonetheless inappropriate for someone in Camilla's constitutional position. The messages also revealed a sophisticated understanding of media manipulation and public relations strategy that went far beyond what most observers attributed to the royal family. There were detailed discussions about timing announcements to overshadow negative news, coordinating with friendly journalists to promote positive coverage, and using charitable events to improve public perception during difficult periods. The level of strategic thinking displayed in these communications suggested a highly organized approach to managing royal reputation. Perhaps most concerning were the messages that dealt with political matters. While the royal family was expected to maintain political neutrality, the recovered communications showed Camilla expressing strong opinions about government policies, discussing strategies for influencing political decisions, and maintaining relationships with political figures that appeared to cross constitutional boundaries. These activities raised serious questions about the separation of royal duties from political influence. The investigation team discovered that Camilla had been particularly active in communications related to environmental policy, an area where her public statements had always been carefully measured and apparently neutral. The private messages revealed a much more assertive approach, including attempts to influence government environmental policies and coordinate with environmental organizations in ways that could affect government decision-making. This political engagement was far more extensive than anything the public had been led to believe. Detective Mitchell's analysis of communication patterns revealed that Camilla's activities were not isolated incidents, but part of a systematic approach to expanding royal influence beyond traditional constitutional limits. The timing of messages often coincided with important political events, charitable fundraising campaigns, and media coverage periods, suggesting careful coordination between her private communications and public activities. The team also discovered evidence of financial irregularities related to royal charitable activities. Messages discussed diverting charitable funds, using royal influence to benefit certain organizations over others, and coordinating with wealthy donors in ways that could constitute conflicts of interest. The scale of these activities suggested that they had been ongoing for years and had potentially affected millions of pounds in charitable contributions. Richardson's technical analysis revealed that Camilla had been using sophisticated methods to hide her communications, including regularly changing phones, using temporary messaging applications, and employing encryption techniques that suggested professional guidance. The effort put into concealing these activities indicated an awareness that they would be controversial if discovered and a determination to continue them despite potential risks. The psychological profile that emerged from the messages showed a person who was highly intelligent, strategically minded, and frustrated by the limitations of traditional royal roles. The communications revealed someone who was actively working to expand her influence and impact beyond the ceremonial duties typically associated with royal positions. This ambition, while perhaps admirable in other contexts, raised serious questions about constitutional propriety and democratic accountability. Dr. Stevens' legal analysis identified several potential violations of laws governing charitable organizations, political neutrality requirements for public figures, and regulations surrounding the use of public funds and resources. While proving criminal intent would be difficult, the evidence suggested patterns of behavior that could justify formal legal proceedings if pursued through appropriate channels. The investigation team faced increasing pressure as their work continued. The sensitivity of their discoveries meant that only a handful of people were aware of the full scope of what they had uncovered, and the potential for leaks or security breaches created constant anxiety. The constitutional implications of their findings meant that every decision had to be carefully considered and documented to withstand potential legal and political scrutiny. Chief Inspector Hartwell struggled with the decision of how to proceed with their investigation. The evidence they had gathered was substantial and suggested serious breaches of royal protocol and potentially illegal activities. However, The constitutional crisis that could result from pursuing formal charges against the queen consort was unprecedented and could have far-reaching consequences for the monarchy and the nation. The team's work revealed that Camilla's activities were part of a broader pattern of behavior that raised questions about other members of the royal family and their own adherence to constitutional limitations. The sophisticated nature of her communication security and the systematic approach to her activities suggested that she had not been acting alone and that other royal household members might be involved in similar activities. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that they were uncovering evidence of a fundamental transformation in how the monarchy operated behind the scenes. The traditional model of royal neutrality and ceremonial duties was being challenged by a more activist approach that sought to influence policy, direct charitable activities, and shape public opinion in ways that had never been publicly acknowledged or constitutionally sanctioned. The pressure to make decisions about how to handle their discoveries was mounting, and the investigation team knew that their next steps would have consequences that extended far beyond their small group. The evidence they had gathered represented a potential constitutional crisis that could reshape the relationship between monarchy and democracy in ways that no one could fully predict or control. The third week of the investigation brought revelations that shocked even the experienced team members who thought they had seen everything. Detective Inspector Mitchell discovered a series of messages that revealed Camilla's involvement in international affairs far beyond anything the public could have imagined. The communications showed coordination with foreign dignitaries, discussions about trade relationships, and, most alarmingly, advanced knowledge of diplomatic initiatives that were supposedly confidential government matters. The complexity of the case had grown exponentially as new evidence emerged daily. Technology specialist Richardson had now recovered over 3,000 individual messages spanning 18 months of communications. The sheer volume of data required sophisticated analysis techniques and additional personnel, all while maintaining absolute secrecy about the investigation. The team worked around the clock in shifts, each member understanding that their work could potentially rewrite constitutional law and reshape public understanding of the monarchy. Dr. Stevens' constitutional analysis revealed that several of the international communications could constitute violations of diplomatic protocol and potentially treasonous activities. Messages showing Camilla sharing confidential government information with foreign contacts raised serious national security concerns that extended far beyond questions of royal propriety. The investigation had evolved from an internal royal matter into something that could affect Britain's international relationships and diplomatic standing. Chief Inspector Hartwell made the difficult decision to bring intelligence services into the investigation. MI5 and MI6 analysts were quietly assigned to review the international communications and assess potential security implications. Their involvement added another layer of complexity to an already delicate situation, as intelligence agencies operated under different legal frameworks and had their own institutional interests in the outcome of the investigation. The messages revealed that Camilla had been particularly active in communications related to Commonwealth countries, using her royal status to engage in discussions that appeared to influence trade negotiations and diplomatic relationships. There were exchanges with business leaders from Australia, Canada, and South Africa that discussed investment opportunities, government policies, and strategies for influencing political decisions in those countries. These activities represented a level of international political engagement that was completely outside her constitutional role. Detective Mitchell's analysis of communication patterns revealed sophisticated coordination between Camilla's activities and major international events. Messages often preceded important diplomatic announcements, trade agreements, and political developments by days or weeks, suggesting that she had access to confidential government information and was using it to coordinate with external contacts. This advanced knowledge raised serious questions about security leaks within the government and the potential for royal influence on foreign policy. The investigation team discovered evidence that Camilla had been using her royal connections to facilitate business relationships that could benefit her personal interests. Messages discussed investment opportunities, property transactions, and business partnerships that appeared to leverage her royal status for financial gain. While royal family members were allowed to have private investments, the scale and nature of these activities suggested systematic use of royal privilege for personal enrichment. Richardson's technical analysis revealed that Camilla had been sharing encrypted files with unknown recipients, including documents that appeared to contain confidential government information. The sophisticated file-sharing techniques she employed suggested professional guidance and raise questions about who else might have access to sensitive royal and government communications. The security implications of these activities were staggering and could potentially compromise national security. The psychological profile that emerged from the messages showed someone who had become increasingly bold in pushing constitutional boundaries. The communications revealed a progression from relatively minor protocol violations to more serious breaches of royal duty and potentially illegal activities. This escalation suggested that Camilla had become confident that her activities would not be discovered or that her royal status would protect her from consequences. Dr. Stevens identified several potential criminal charges that could result from the evidence they had gathered. These included violations of the Official Secrets Act, charity fraud, conspiracy to influence government policy, and potentially treason if the international communications were deemed to threaten national security. The complexity of pursuing such charges against a member of the royal family created unprecedented legal challenges that had no historical precedent. The investigation team also discovered evidence of attempts to influence media coverage in ways that went far beyond traditional royal public relations activities. Messages discussed paying journalists for favorable coverage, suppressing negative stories through threats and intimidation, and coordinating with media owners to manipulate public opinion. These activities represented a systematic assault on press freedom and democratic discourse that could have far-reaching implications for British society. Perhaps most shocking were the messages that revealed Camilla's knowledge of and involvement in covering up other royal scandals. The communications showed coordination with palace staff to manage public relations crises, hide embarrassing information about other royal family members, and manipulate public perception of royal activities. This evidence suggested that royal household management involved systematic deception of the public on a scale that had never been previously suspected. The financial analysis conducted by forensic accountants revealed complex money trails connecting royal charitable activities to private investments and business interests. Messages discussed using charitable funds for personal purposes, directing donations toward organizations that provided kickbacks or benefits to royal family members, and manipulating charitable activities to avoid tax obligations. These financial irregularities represented potential fraud on a massive scale. Chief Inspector Hartwell found himself under increasing pressure from government officials who were becoming aware of the investigation's scope and implications. The potential for constitutional crisis was becoming more apparent as evidence mounted, and political leaders were beginning to express concern about the stability of the monarchy and its impact on government operations. The investigation team was caught between their duty to pursue the evidence and growing political pressure to contain the situation. The international implications of their discoveries were becoming more complex as foreign governments began to express concern about the security of their diplomatic communications with Britain. Several Commonwealth countries had quietly inquired about potential breaches of diplomatic confidence, suggesting that news of the investigation was beginning to leak despite strict security measures. The potential for international diplomatic incidents added another dimension to an already complex situation. Detective Mitchell's work revealed patterns of behavior that suggested Camilla's activities were part of a broader transformation of the royal household into a political and business operation that operated outside traditional constitutional constraints. The evidence showed systematic efforts to monetize royal status, influence government policy, and manipulate public opinion in ways that challenged fundamental principles of constitutional monarchy and democratic governance. The investigation team realized that they were uncovering evidence of activities that could fundamentally alter the relationship between monarchy and democracy in Britain. The scope and systematic nature of the violations they had discovered suggested that the traditional model of constitutional monarchy was being undermined from within by royal family members who were using their positions for personal and political gain. As the investigation entered its fourth week, the team faced mounting pressure to reach conclusions and make recommendations about how to proceed. The evidence they had gathered was overwhelming and suggested serious criminal behavior, but the constitutional and political implications of taking action against the Queen Consort were unprecedented and potentially destabilizing. Their next decisions would determine not only the fate of their investigation, but potentially the future of the monarchy itself. The weight of their discoveries was becoming increasingly difficult to bear as team members grappled with the implications of what they had uncovered. The evidence suggested that the British public had been systematically deceived about the nature of royal activities, and that the constitutional principles underlying democratic governance were being undermined by those sworn to uphold them. The fourth phase of the investigation brought the team face-to-face with the most damaging evidence yet discovered. Detective Inspector Mitchell uncovered a series of communications that revealed Camilla's direct involvement in manipulating government appointments and influencing judicial decisions. The messages showed coordination with political figures to ensure that certain individuals were appointed to key positions in government departments, regulatory agencies, and even the judiciary itself. The sophistication of these influence operations was breathtaking. Technology specialist Richardson had recovered detailed plans for long-term strategies to place sympathetic individuals in positions of power throughout the British government system. These plans spanned multiple years and showed careful coordination between royal household members, political allies, and business interests to systematically influence the machinery of government from within. Dr. Stevens' analysis revealed that these activities constituted the most serious constitutional violations they had yet discovered. The separation of powers principle that formed the foundation of British democracy was being systematically undermined through royal influence on executive appointments and judicial decisions. The evidence suggested that Camilla had been operating as the center of a network that was fundamentally altering the balance of power in British government. Chief Inspector Hartwell struggled with the implications of what they were discovering. The evidence pointed to a conspiracy that went far beyond individual violations of royal protocol and suggested systematic corruption of democratic institutions. The involvement of serving government ministers, judges, and senior civil servants in these activities meant that the investigation could potentially implicate dozens of high-ranking officials and threaten the stability of the entire government system. The intelligence services analysis had revealed international dimensions to the corruption network that were even more alarming than the domestic activities. Messages showed coordination with foreign intelligence services, sharing of classified information with unauthorized foreign contacts, and participation in international business schemes that could compromise British national security. These activities appeared to be generating significant financial returns for royal family members while potentially exposing the country to foreign influence and manipulation. Detective Mitchell discovered evidence of systematic blackmail operations being conducted through royal household channels. Messages revealed the collection and use of compromising information about government officials, business leaders, and media figures to ensure compliance with royal wishes and silence potential critics. The scope of these operations suggested that they had been ongoing for years and had affected numerous individuals in positions of power and influence. The financial analysis had uncovered a complex web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and investment vehicles that were being used to launder money generated through royal influence operations. Forensic accountants estimated that tens of millions of pounds had been moved through these channels over the past several years, representing systematic looting of public resources and charitable funds on an unprecedented scale. Richardson's technical analysis revealed that Camilla had been working with sophisticated cybersecurity professionals to monitor communications of government officials, journalists, and other individuals who might pose threats to royal interests. The surveillance operations she had authorized used advanced techniques typically associated with intelligence agencies and represented illegal monitoring of British citizens on a massive scale. The investigation team discovered that several recent political scandals and resignations had been orchestrated through royal household operations designed to remove individuals who were not sufficiently compliant with royal wishes. Messages showed detailed planning for media campaigns, the release of damaging information, and coordination with political opponents to destroy the careers of targeted individuals. Perhaps most shocking was the evidence of royal involvement in manipulating democratic elections. Messages revealed financial contributions to political candidates, coordination of media campaigns, and use of royal resources to influence electoral outcomes. These activities represented direct assault on democratic principles and could potentially invalidate election results if the full scope of royal involvement became public. Dr. Stevens' legal analysis identified potential charges that could result in life imprisonment if pursued against Camilla and her co-conspirators. The evidence suggested violations of laws governing treason, corruption, fraud, electoral manipulation, and conspiracy against the state. The scale and systematic nature of these crimes created legal challenges that had no precedent in British legal history. The psychological profile that emerged from the communications revealed someone who had developed a sense of absolute entitlement and belief that royal status placed her above legal and constitutional constraints. The messages showed increasing recklessness and arrogance as activities escalated, suggesting that Camilla believed herself to be untouchable and beyond accountability for her actions. Chief Inspector Hartwell faced unprecedented pressure as government officials became increasingly aware of the investigation's implications. Several cabinet ministers had privately expressed concern about the potential for complete governmental collapse if the evidence became public. The investigation team was operating in an atmosphere of crisis as political leaders struggled to understand the full scope of what had been discovered. The international diplomatic crisis was escalating as foreign governments began to demand explanations for potential breaches of diplomatic security and intelligence sharing. Several countries had quietly suspended certain forms of cooperation with Britain until the security of their communications could be guaranteed. The investigation team realized that their discoveries could fundamentally alter Britain's international relationships and standing. Detective Mitchell's analysis revealed that the corruption network extended into law enforcement agencies, with evidence suggesting that certain police investigations had been influenced or suppressed through royal intervention. Messages showed coordination with senior police officials to protect royal interests and target individuals who posed threats to the network's operations. This police corruption added another layer of criminality to an already complex case. The investigation team discovered evidence that royal household staff had been systematically intimidated and silenced to prevent disclosure of illegal activities. Several former employees had been subjected to legal harassment, financial pressure, and personal threats to ensure their silence about what they had witnessed. This pattern of intimidation suggested a sophisticated operation designed to maintain security around criminal activities. The media manipulation operations had been far more extensive than initially realized, with evidence showing that major news organizations had been compromised through financial relationships, personal blackmail, and systematic infiltration of newsroom operations. The ability to control public information and shape public opinion represented a fundamental threat to democratic discourse and informed citizenship. Richardson's recovery of deleted financial records revealed that royal family members had been systematically stealing from charitable organizations, diverting public funds intended for worthy causes toward personal enrichment and political operations. The scale of this theft was staggering, with estimates suggesting that hundreds of millions of pounds intended for charitable purposes had been diverted over several years. The evidence suggested that traditional constitutional safeguards had been systematically bypassed through the creation of informal power networks that operated outside legal oversight and democratic accountability. The royal family had essentially created a shadow government that wielded significant influence over official government operations while remaining hidden from public view and legal scrutiny. As the investigation entered its final phase, the team faced the impossible task of determining how to respond to evidence of criminal activity on a scale that threatened the foundation of British democracy. The systematic nature of the violations and the involvement of high-ranking officials throughout government created a situation where traditional law enforcement responses seemed inadequate to address the scope of the criminality they had uncovered. The weight of their discoveries had created an atmosphere of crisis within the investigation team, as members struggled to comprehend the full implications of what they had revealed. The evidence suggested that British democracy had been systematically undermined over a period of years by those sworn to protect and defend it, creating a constitutional crisis unlike anything in the nation's history. The final phase of the investigation brought the most difficult decisions the team would ever face. Detective Inspector Mitchell found herself at the center of a constitutional crisis that threatened to reshape British society fundamentally. The evidence they had gathered was irrefutable and pointed to criminal activity on a scale that had no precedent in modern British history. Yet the implications of taking action against the Queen Consort were so profound that every possible response carried enormous risks for the nation's stability. Technology specialist Richardson completed her analysis of the digital evidence with findings that exceeded even their worst expectations. She had recovered over 10,000 individual communications, financial documents, and operational plans that painted a comprehensive picture of systematic corruption extending throughout the highest levels of British government and society. The technical sophistication of the criminal operations rivaled those of professional intelligence agencies and organized crime syndicates. Chief Inspector Hartwell convened a series of emergency meetings with government officials, intelligence service leaders, and constitutional experts to determine how the nation should respond to their discoveries. The consensus was that public revelation of the evidence could trigger complete collapse of public confidence in democratic institutions and potentially lead to civil unrest or political revolution. Yet failure to act on evidence of such serious criminality would represent an abandonment of the rule of law that was equally unacceptable. Dr. Stevens' final constitutional analysis concluded that the activities they had documented represented the most serious challenge to British democracy since the English Civil War. The systematic subversion of democratic institutions through royal influence had created a shadow government that operated outside constitutional constraints and legal accountability. The evidence suggested that Britain had been functioning as a hybrid system where democratic processes were manipulated by hidden royal power networks. The intelligence services had completed their security assessment and concluded that the national security implications of the discovered activities were catastrophic. Foreign intelligence agencies had gained unprecedented access to British government operations through royal family connections, and the country's ability to conduct independent foreign policy had been severely compromised. Several allies had begun to treat Britain as a potentially compromised partner in sensitive international operations. Detective Mitchell struggled with the personal implications of leading an investigation that could fundamentally alter her country's political system. The evidence was clear and demanded action, yet she understood that her decisions could trigger consequences that would affect millions of people. The weight of responsibility was crushing as she grappled with choices that no police officer should ever have to make. The investigation team discovered that other royal family members had been aware of and participated in the criminal network, though to varying degrees. Prince William had been kept largely isolated from the most serious activities, apparently as protection for the future of the monarchy. However, several other senior royals had been active participants in influence operations and financial crimes, suggesting that the corruption extended throughout the royal household. Richardson's final technical report revealed that the criminal operations had been planned and executed with military precision over a period of years. The communications showed long-term strategic planning, careful risk assessment, and systematic execution of complex operations designed to maximize royal influence while minimizing detection risks. The level of organization suggested professional criminal expertise that went far beyond what royal household staff could provide independently. The financial crimes investigation concluded that the total amount stolen from public and charitable sources exceeded £1 billion over the period covered by the evidence. This massive theft had been accomplished through sophisticated schemes that diverted funds from their intended purposes toward royal family enrichment and political operations. The scale of the financial crimes alone justified severe criminal penalties even without considering the constitutional violations. Chief Inspector Hartwell faced increasing pressure from political leaders who wanted the investigation results suppressed to avoid governmental collapse. Several cabinet ministers argued that the public interest would be better served by quietly removing Camilla from royal duties and implementing reforms to prevent future abuses rather than pursuing criminal charges that could destroy public confidence in democratic institutions. Dr. Stevens argued forcefully that failure to pursue criminal charges would establish a precedent that placed royal family members above the law and would fundamentally undermine the principle of equality before the law that formed the foundation of democratic society. Her legal analysis concluded that the evidence demanded prosecution regardless of the potential consequences for political stability. The international implications continued to escalate as foreign governments demanded explanations for intelligence breaches and diplomatic violations. Several countries had begun to reconsider their relationships with Britain based on evidence that their confidential communications had been compromised through royal family criminal activities. The potential for long-term damage to Britain's international standing was becoming increasingly apparent. Detective Mitchell made the painful decision to recommend that criminal charges be filed against Camilla and her co-conspirators despite the potential consequences for national stability. Her analysis concluded that the rule of law could not be selectively applied based on political convenience, and that failure to hold royal family members accountable for serious crimes would represent an abandonment of democratic principles that was ultimately more dangerous than the short-term instability that prosecution might cause. The investigation team prepared comprehensive reports documenting their findings and recommendations for presentation to government leaders and parliamentary committees. The evidence was so extensive that the reports filled thousands of pages and required sophisticated security measures to prevent unauthorized disclosure. The team understood that their work would be scrutinized for years to come and that their decisions would be judged by history. Richardson implemented advanced security measures to protect the digital evidence from potential tampering or destruction. She created multiple encrypted copies of all recovered data and distributed them to secure locations to ensure that the evidence would survive any attempts to suppress or destroy it. The technical measures she took reflected the team's understanding that powerful interests would attempt to prevent their findings from becoming public. The media strategy discussions revealed the complexity of communicating such serious findings to the public without triggering panic or political instability. The investigation team worked with communications experts to develop plans for gradually releasing information in ways that would allow public understanding to develop while minimizing the risk of violent public reactions or institutional collapse. Chief Inspector Hartwell's final decision was to present the evidence to Parliament through established constitutional procedures while simultaneously preparing criminal charges against all identified perpetrators. This approach would allow democratic institutions to respond to the crisis while maintaining the rule of law and ensuring that justice was pursued regardless of the political implications. The personal cost of the investigation had been enormous for all team members, who had worked for months under extreme pressure while grappling with discoveries that challenged their fundamental beliefs about their country and its institutions. The psychological impact of uncovering systematic corruption at the highest levels of society had affected everyone involved and would likely influence their perspectives on power and authority for the rest of their lives. As the investigation concluded, Detective Mitchell reflected on the irony that their commitment to protecting royal security had led them to uncover evidence that the royal family posed the greatest threat to the democratic institutions they were sworn to serve. The investigation had revealed that the greatest enemies of British democracy were not foreign adversaries or domestic terrorists, but the very individuals who symbolized the nation's commitment to law and constitutional government. The final reports were delivered to government officials with the understanding that the decisions made in response to their findings would determine whether Britain would emerge from the crisis as a stronger democracy or would slide toward authoritarian rule through royal manipulation of democratic institutions. The investigation team had done their duty by uncovering the truth. The responsibility for responding appropriately to that truth now rested with elected officials and the British people themselves. The evidence they had gathered would eventually become public through parliamentary procedures and judicial processes, ensuring that the British people would learn the truth about how their democratic institutions had been systematically subverted by those they had trusted to protect them. The investigation had revealed the fragility of democratic institutions and the constant vigilance required to protect them from those who would abuse power for personal gain.